I'd like to call this meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board to order. Is there a motion to certify closed session?
Madam Chair, I certify to that to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Is there a second?
I will second that outstanding motion.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Surza.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Ms. Zomby.
Ms. Surza, item 4.1, would you please take the roll?
Dr. Beers.
Here.
Ms. Cook.
Here.
Mr. Dowell.
Here.
Ms. Hummel.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mrs. Young.
Here.
Ms. Zomby.
Moving on to item 4.2, Ms. Hummel. On to item 3.0, public hearing, operating budget.
Oh, this is where I come in. Thank you, Madam Chair. It is this point in the public hearing where citizens are invited to address the board. Those citizens desiring to speak should have submitted speaker cards to the clerk prior to the start of tonight's meeting. These speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their names for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. It is the board's interest and desire that all comments are heard and respected. And citizens are asked to not engage in applauding, verbal outbursts, or any other type of demonstrations during the presentations. Personnel matters are not considered in public meetings, therefore the board requests that all speakers refrain from making reference to specific individuals in any form or fashion. Though the board does not respond to your comments during the meeting, your comments are being heard and appreciated. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to make their presentation, and the board asks that you respect this time limitation. Also, please be reminded that no time may be yielded to another speaker. Your acceptance and adherence to these guidelines will be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair. My instructions are concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
We have 3 speaker cards for the budget hearing portion, and so Jennifer Bickham Mendez.
Good evening, Dr. Heron and members of the school board. My name is Jennifer Bickham Mendez. I'm a resident of James City County, a parent of 2 WJCC graduates, and a member of the Village. The Village is a community organization, as you know, that advocates for issues of equity in our schools, a goal articulated as goal number 2 in the division's strategic plan. We are happy to see the increase in the budget to support the hire of 2 ESL teachers to address the growing needs of English language learner students in our schools. The addition of an educational interpreter is also an encouraging development from an equity-driven perspective. We are disappointed, however, in our division still lacking behind other divisions in the region in the student-teacher ratio for English language learner students, as well as teacher salaries. Our teachers and students deserve to be at a school that is a leader in these areas. Likewise, we are disappointed in the continued allocation of funding on a per-student basis. This approach does not align with goal number 2 of the division's own strategic plan. As the Village has consistently called for, we keep trying to send this message, a division that doesn't really just want to talk about equity, but actually wants to do something to address economic and racial disparities would allocate resources, including teacher-student ratios, as well as other resources, based on need, not just numbers. Schools with greater numbers of children from economically disadvantaged backgrounds should receive higher funding levels than other schools. Finally, the division has an opportunity before it with regard to these new positions. If the budget's approved in these new hires, 5 new guidance counselors and 2 teachers, ESL teachers, could increase the diversity of teachers and counseling staff at our schools. Students at our schools deserve guidance counselors and teachers who understand their experiences, look like them, and can communicate with them in the languages in which they think and dream. Please hire teachers and guidance counselors who represent racial and cultural diversity and who speak Spanish fluently to better serve our English language learner students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amy Clark.
Good evening, Madam Superintendent, members of the school board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Amy Quirk, and I am the parent of a first grader and a member of the Village Initiative. I wanted to echo some of Jennifer's comments. Tonight I wanted to talk about leadership. We as the Village Initiative would like to see our school district be leaders in terms of educational equity and in racial equity. There are some important investments in the proposed budget that we appreciate. Increased funding for teacher salaries, for counselors, for EL teachers. But it's not enough. These things don't make us leaders. So if we think about the issue of teacher salaries, the teachers are so important. They deserve to be paid more. But this investment doesn't put us as a leader in the region. We see that we continue to fall behind in terms of competitive salaries. We need to be a leader in this area. There's funding for more counselors. These are vitally important to our students, but the investments, from my understanding, are what's required by the state's standards of quality. We're not going above and beyond to be leaders in excellence in this area. There's more funding for ELL teachers. This is desperately needed, but is it enough? Our ELL teacher-to-student ratio still lags behind other districts in the region. We appreciate these areas of investment. They're going in the right direction, but let's be aggressive. Let's stand out. Let's set the bar for excellence in the region rather than be the school district that's lagging behind. There's also a number of other areas where I feel like we could be much bolder in our leadership in terms of equity. Let's be leaders in need-based funding. Let's show other districts how to channel resources to the students and to the schools that need it most. Let's be leaders in terms of the racial discipline gap and the disproportionate suspensions and expulsions of students of color, which we know is a problem. Let's do that by being leaders in implicit bias training and in training in culturally responsive pedagogy. I don't see these things in the current budget. Let's be leaders in the recruitment of teachers of color. What strategies are we using to be aggressive to get the most recent graduates? Again, something I don't see in the budget. Let's be leaders in the retainment of teachers of color. There are things that we can do that don't cost any money. The Village Initiative has been proposing an advisory committee of teachers of color that can give the school board and the administration an idea of what does it mean to feel isolated within a predominantly white staff? What specific strategies can we use to improve their experience? So I think we need investments in equity, and we need bold leadership going forward. We have a good school district, but we don't want to just be good. We want to be great, and we're going to keep falling behind unless we take a bold step forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oregano?
Hi. Thanks for hearing our thoughts. My name is Leah Corrigano. I'm a member of the Village Initiative. I've been of the Williamsburg City community, James City County community as well since 2015. I want to reiterate some of the things that my colleagues from the village have already said, and I want to be succinct about it. There are a few things that we're asking for within the budget itself, higher salaries and incentives for teachers, including, or for example, housing and rent assistance that would make us competitive, smaller class sizes, programs for dual language learner programs, and more counselors rather than more security guards. And those are things that would cost the school or the district. I would also urge the school board to commit to the following low or no cost strategies for achieving equity in the school system. Needs-based funding, allocate resources across schools and within schools based on student need, recruit teachers of color as well as white teachers who are trained in culturally responsive teaching, establish an advisory committee of teachers of color to develop recommendations to improve retention, and require some teacher professional development credits be fulfilled through instruction on equity and cultural responsive training so that everybody knows how to best serve our underserved learners and to close that opportunity gap.
There are no additional speaker cards for the budget, so hearing no one else from the audience, I will close the hearing on the budget. We'll move into item 4.1. We did the roll. Approval of the agenda.
Yes, Madam Chair, I would like to approve the agenda as presented with 2 modifications. If we could remove 9.03, retire policy JGE, and remove 9.04, retire policy JGD. We are waiting to hear some additional information from staff, and so until we hear that information and have kind of a, at the policy committee level, we would like to bring these back at a later date.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Souza?
Mrs. Young,
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Ms. Cook,
Aye.
Mr. Dowell,
Aye.
Ms. Hummel,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
Aye.
Ms. Zomby.
Aye. Moving on to item 5.1, announcements and superintendent's report. Dr. Herron.
Good evening, Madam Chair. I want to begin my report this evening by briefly talking about the coronavirus and our schools. Thankfully, there are no confirmed cases of coronavirus in Virginia right now. Still, WJCC Schools is in regular contact with our local health department, and we are following guidance from the Virginia Health Department and CDC. We are reviewing and updating the division's pandemic plans with the goal of keeping our schools open and operational. At the same time, frequently touched surfaces, including student desks, door handles, and common areas of the school are being cleaned daily with disinfectant. As we've seen, the coronavirus is an evolving health issue. I want to assure families that we will continue to follow the advice of health experts and develop our plans accordingly. Additional communication will be sent to families and staff through phone calls and email as necessary. Moving on now to another big topic of the day, the presidential primary and this morning's 2-hour delay. As you know, we opened our schools 2 hours late to accommodate the larger voter turnout expected before people went to work this morning. I would like to thank our community for the way in which our voters visited our polling places, housed at 11 of our schools. During every election, our staff works closely with the voters' registrar's office to clearly mark entrances to polling places and to limit voter access to other areas of the building. In addition, school and central office staff monitor hallways throughout the day. Although the polls don't close for a few more minutes, I'm happy to say that no problems were reporting during the school day at any of our schools. And finally tonight, I want to say a big thank you to the WJCC Schools Foundation and its donors. Last week, the foundation surprised teachers at every school in the division as they awarded more than $71,000 in innovative learning grants. That is more than double the amount awarded last year. Through innovative learning grants, the WJCC Schools Foundation provides private sector funds to support learning opportunities that foster creativity, risk-taking, problem-solving, and real-world experiences for students. We are so fortunate to live and work in a community that values its public schools. The innovative learning grants are made possible through the generous contributions of our friends, neighbours, and businesses right here in Williamsburg and James City County. On behalf of the students and staff in our schools, I want to thank the WJC Schools Foundation Board, members, and donors for their ongoing support of our schools. You allow our students to extend student learning in many important and innovative ways. And this evening, I want to acknowledge Ms. Pooley, President of WJC Schools Foundation, who's with us this evening, and other board members as well. Madam Chair, that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Do board members have additional comments, updates that they would like to provide? Ms. Cook?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On February 24th, I attended the PTA Council meeting to talk about advocating for our CIP request, which I think I've mentioned publicly before, and I just wanted to share with you that conversation in which I asked the PTAs, the elementary school PTAs, to share their experiences with overcrowding at their elementary schools with local elected leaders to advocate for the 10th elementary school. And I just wanted to share that I was frank with them that thus far the only public comment about the topic has been in opposition, and I wanted to share the board's perspective on that. So with regard to those who suggested a new school is not necessary because our growth is leveling off and our enrollment is not growing, and therefore we don't need a school. The facts are that we need a new elementary school even if enrollment is flat, which we don't know that it will be, but we need one anyway based on today's enrollment. And this is about space for our current needs. And that compared to other divisions our size in Virginia, we have fewer schools. We have 16 and others have 19 to 26. We don't build schools on a whim here, so a 10th elementary school would be well within the range of normal. And because we need this space now, we will be asking for trailers in the upcoming budget. If the local funders decide to put off funding a new elementary school, parents can anticipate seeing trailers at several elementary schools in the next several years. And for those who have said that they think that this is really a pre-K space issue, the facts are that we need 700 elementary school seats. Building pre-K space does not get us there, and therefore doesn't solve the space problem. And that pre-K students are part of our elementary schools, and looking at them as a separate population is not something we should do. It's not condoned by the Virginia Department of Education, and anyone who suggests otherwise is conflating programmatic decisions with capital needs. And we need to have a community-wide conversation about pre-K, which we've discussed as a board. And the ground is shifting under our feet nationally, at the state level and locally when it comes to early childhood interventions. And unless and until we have a robust conversation about the future of pre-K in our community, it would be unwise to spend public dollars on capital projects directed specifically to that population, which is why we've put it out in the outer years as a placeholder. So I was just sharing that with you as an FYI, and it's my hope that the PTAs will share their own thoughts with the funders on the topic.
Thank you very much.
I would like to thank the speakers from the village who talked tonight, but also ask them to also speak to our funding partners, because I think everyone on this board would love, right now we're facing an $800,000 funding gap with our budget, and if we're asking for a 4% raise, that's a $2 million funding gap between what the county and the city say, our funding partners say they will provide to us versus what we think we need. So we are counting on the citizens of this community to share that message with our funding partners, because we can't float bonds. We can only deal with the money that we're given by our funding partners. So I would just like to tell everyone out there that thinks like we do, that our teachers deserve more money, that we need more counselors, that we need, more attention for ESL teachers, that this board agrees, we just don't have the funding for it unless our funding partners give it to us. So I just want to make clear that everyone understands that. I also, on a happy note, want to say that $70,000 is a really fun thing to see happen. So I was able to go on a yellow school bus and ride around to multiple schools and actually see those wonderful, the kids all clapping and excited for their teachers, and all the pom-poms and the bands and the whole hoopla. It was really fun, and I wanted to just thank the WJCC Foundation for their continued support of our system, and especially Penny Pulley, who will be speaking, and our other board members, if there are any WJCC board members in the audience. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Are there additional comments?
Comments, or are we saving those announcements? I don't have any announcements.
We'll do.
I
we'll
do
do
have
board
comments
at the,
about
at the
what
end,
was
but if
just
you have
said.
an announcement.
I think I said account.
All right, so we'll have an opportunity to speak at the end and share our thoughts, and certainly through the budget conversation. So now we're moving on to citizens' comments, where we have an opportunity for citizens to share their thoughts with the board. So, Mr. Kelly, do you feel the need to read?
I don't personally feel the need to redo it, but I'll be happy to do so. Let me do so.
Why don't you just do
I'd say do so. Thank you, Madam Chair. It is at this point in our meeting where citizens are invited to address the board. Those citizens desiring to speak should have submitted speaker cards to the clerk prior to the start of tonight's meeting. These speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their names for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. It is the board's interest and desire that all comments are heard and respected. Hence, citizens are asked to not engage in applauding, verbal outbursts, or any type of demonstrations during the presentations. Personnel matters are not considered in public meetings. Therefore, the board requests that all speakers refrain from making reference to specific individuals in any form or fashion. Though the board does not respond to your comments during the meeting, your comments are being heard and appreciated. Each speaker is allocated 3 minutes to make their presentation. The board asks that you respect this time limitation. Also, please be reminded that no time may be yielded to another speaker. Your acceptance and adherence to these guidelines will be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair. My instructions are concluded.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Penny Pulley?
Madam Chair, Dr. Olwen, Board, how are you all this evening? It's very nice to see you. My name is Penny Pulley, and I am the president of the Schools Foundation. This is Jan Leslie, who is helping me to represent the board of the foundation board. I think all of you probably remember Clarence Wilson as the founding president of this organization, and you may also remember our second president, Kathleen Mullins. Kathleen unfortunately lost her battle to cancer in October, and I was elected to office in November of 2019. Fortunately for us, Clarence is still serving on the board and serves as an important resource. In addition to Clarence, we have 25 directors serving on the Schools Foundation board, and because of their generous donations, all of the funds that are donated by donors, independent donors, goes 100% into the grants. We brought each of you a quick facts brochure, little present, and I would like to draw your attention to some of the facts which reflect our activity until our most recent grant cycle, which concluded last Tuesday, just last week. But as of 2019, we had given away over $150,000 in grant money to almost 200 teachers. Last week, we gave away almost $72,000 to upwards of 50 teachers, and more than half of you attended the awards day at Berkeley Middle School and rode buses and so forth, and we really appreciate that. That was great. We are celebrating our 5th year of operation, and by way of celebrating that 5th year, we doubled the maximum grant request allowed from $2,000 to $4,000 per request. So we gave away more money this year than we have ever given away in one cycle. So we consider that progress. It is difficult to give an exact number of students impacted by the grants because the grants are sometimes carried over for several years. And sometimes they act as incubator ideas that are adopted by other teachers in other schools. So the best thing we can safely say is that every school has received innovative learning grants, and the grants have been awarded across all grade levels. We feel good about our impact, and we sure hope you do too. But we credit our success to our approximately 300 individual donors, including substantial support from Ferguson and Town Bank. Thank you, School Board. Thank you, Dr. Olwen, for that great presentation. Thank you, Julie Hummel, as our liaison, and for those comments that you made about the foundation. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Moving on to item 7.1, these are proposed agenda items. Award a contract for request for proposal number 20-14534 for threat, risk, and vulnerability assessment. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is part of our end-of-year spending plan, bringing yet another item forward for your consideration this evening, and Mr. Snipe's going to present the item. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chair, school board members, and Dr. Herron. As Dr. Herron says, tonight's agenda item was in the FY19 year-end spending plan. The request aligns with Goal 4 of our strategic plan with safety and security. And as we discussed, the vulnerability assessment will evaluate potential risk and areas of weakness that we have. The award winner will also provide recommendations and commendations for things that we have done in the past, such as vegetables. And RFP was sent out on February the 3rd, and it was returned on March 2nd. And the superintendent recommends the board review the information and award a contract at a subsequent school board meeting.
Are there questions for Mr.?
Being the sensitivity of this assessment, this does not become in the public domain, does it? But the board can have I believe the closed session rules so the board can have a closed session discussion about security and assessments and not be in the public domain, right?
That's correct.
Okay, 'cause I just want to make sure that we're keeping those security, particularly the vulnerabilities, out of the public domain, and that we have a opportunity to talk about it, and then we have an opportunity to address that in future capital budgets. So that was the only concern I had, is that I want to make sure that we're staying out of the public domain with that.
I know this is an area of extreme importance for the board that you've communicated many times, and I do believe the intent of this is really to give us a roadmap going forward. We've done a tremendous amount over the last few years, and this is really just to take it to the next level.
Okay.
No comments?
Yeah, I have one or two. This level assessment, is it built into the district's calendar when we would request an assessment to this degree?
On a basis or
Yeah.
years, or we have not built.
Okay.
This is actually the first time we've actually had an outside entity come in to assess where we are. We do work very closely with local police and fire, who are constantly giving feedback, and we have a safety committee that meets very regularly to look at lots of different areas of the system. But this is the first time we've asked an outside entity to have another set of eyes look at what we're doing for feedback.
And that was going to be part of my second question, was local police and fire, are they brought into this assessment, and is that a part of that strategy?
Yes, they are part of our assessment team. They're actually part of our review team for proposal.
You
Thank you.
haven't done this before with a private entity?
We haven't.
We've done a facility condition index, but we have not done a threat assessment of this nature of this detail.
We did something at Clareburg, but
To be clear, we have been regularly
Rosberg.
internally looking at,
Correct.
Absolutely.
Through the CIP and through the safety committee, that's how things come up. For example, the Laurel Lane perimeter enclosure was part of that process, as well as things that we get from our facility condition index, like the vestibules were part of that.
I think we would have had input, Mr. Kelly, to your point, on what that would look like to keep the school more secure at that time. I presume it was an architect rather than an outside entity giving feedback on the perimeter of the school of Laurel Lane.
yeah, that could be.
there,
Numbers on the doors and all that kind of stuff.
So if I can clarify my question, the local police and fire, are they a part of the fact-finding process for this assessment? So we're going to hire an agency to come in and to do a vulnerability assessment for us district-wide, that's right? And so would police and fire be a part of the fact-finding, so what they need to be able to perform their jobs, their duties, when they're called in for exigent circumstances?
The police and fire are part of our safety committee.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we'll do with this report in our safety committee, some of those, they are part of it, as well as they are, Ms. and others, part of our, often with the school resource officer and who control.
A lot of our current safety protocols, we have input from police and fire. And even all of our security drills, they are involved in all of those with us, and they actually perform those for us. So they're very involved on an ongoing basis with all of our security. We seek their guidance when we're looking to add security measures, and we ask, the experts what works and what doesn't. So that's very much part of the safety committee's role and ongoing role of Mr. Weaver with security as well. But this is going to give us more information and hopefully a path forward to be even more secure.
And Mr. Dowell, the first bullet there is conduct interviews with security personnel and school resource officers as well, so they get police input there.
Thank you.
are there additional comments or questions for Mr. Snipes? Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Snipes. All right, item 7.2, Resolution R-13-20, open accounts at Town Bank. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a change in our banking that's about to take place under your consideration, and Ms. Ewan's going to bring some information on background to that this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. The agenda item before you this evening is a resolution authorizing the James City County Treasurer to open bank accounts at Town Bank for the school division. James City County began the transition last year from SunTrust, and for operational efficiency, the school division has historically banked at the same institution as the county. The treasurer anticipates that we will save money on fees and increase our interest earnings by switching to Town Bank. Changing banks will also ensure the school division is getting the best service at the best price. We are recommending that we move forward with this change and ask that you approve the attached resolution, which is a standard bank requirement to open new accounts. Happy to answer any
Questions for Ms. Ewing?
I think you probably just answered my question. Why do we have to approve what bank we use?
Yeah. It's this standard bank
Bank
form,
wants
the bank.
the bank wants the approval of the governing body.
Yes. Board of the government, yes.
So it's not anything that us or the state requires, it's the SunTrust.
And it's
or
a
the
standard bank,
Town Bank.
Town Bank.
bank agreement
Gotcha.
And we would approve this at the next meeting.
plan.
Additional thoughts? Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Moving on to item 8, information and discussion items. Before I toss it back to Dr. Herron, I will ask Mr. Kelly to read a statement, and then Ms. Cook.
Oh, sir.
As a member of the school board of Williamsburg, James City County, I acknowledge that I have an interest in the fiscal year 2020-2021 school budget because my wife is an employee of the WJCC schools. However, I believe that I am able to participate in the consideration of and vote on the budget fairly and in the public interest.
Thank you, Madam
Mr.
Chair.
Kelly. Thank you, Ms. Cook.
As a member of the school board of Williamsburg, James City County, I acknowledge I have an interest in the fiscal year 2021 school budget because I'm an employee of the Williamsburg Health Foundation. However, I believe I'm able to participate in the consideration of and vote on the budget fairly and in the public interest.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. And so now I will turn it over to Dr. Herron to provide
Thank
some
you.
additional information.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a small amount of additional information to provide to the board this evening before they engage in a discussion about the operating budget. Ms. Ewing.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. This evening, I'll be sharing information regarding revenue estimates based on the House and Senate budget versions. This table shows a comparison between the governor's proposed budget and the House and Senate versions, as well as our current year budget. Under the House version, we would see an increase of approximately $681,000 in state revenue beyond what the governor proposed. And with the Senate version, we would see an increase of approximately $545,000 in state revenue beyond what the governor proposed. Differences between the state budget versions mainly have to do with salary increases as well as counselor ratios. The governor's introduced budget provides a 3% salary increase in the second year of the biennium, fiscal year 22, with an effective date of July 1st, 2021, for funded SOQ instructional and support positions. Divisions would have to certify that a 3% average salary increase has been provided during the biennium, either in the first year or in the second year, or through a combination of the 2 years. The House version proposes a 2% salary increase in each year of the biennium, and the Senate version proposes a 4% salary increase in fiscal year 22. The Senate version also proposes a 3% one-time bonus payment in December of 2020 for fiscal year 21. It is unclear if this has to be a one-time payment to employees or if a 3% salary increase would qualify us to receive these funds. This revenue amounts to approximately $810,000. Governor's introduced budget increases state funding in the SOQ for school counselors in fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. Current staffing standards for school counselors are 455 to 1 for elementary, 370 to 1 for middle, and 325 to 1 for high school. The governor's introduced budget reduces the funding staffing ratio in fiscal year 21 to 375 to 1 in elementary, 325 to 1 in middle, and 300 to 1 in high school. Then in fiscal year '22, the governor proposed additional reductions of all funded staffing ratios to 250 to 1. In the House version, the ratio in fiscal year '22 is 325 to 1, and the Senate version reduces the ratio in fiscal year '22 to 300 to 1. For us to meet the ratios for fiscal year '21, we would not need to add additional staff. But to meet the governor's proposed ratio of 250 to 1 in fiscal year '22, we would need an additional 11 FTEs. So the superintendent's proposed budget includes 5 additional school counselor positions. To meet the ratio proposed by the House for fiscal year '22, we would not need to add any positions. And to meet the ratio proposed by the Senate, we would need to add 3 positions by the end of fiscal year '22. As you all know, these are the minimum standards. State law also requires that counselors spend 80% of their time providing direct services to students, so we are still moving toward a ratio of 250 to 1 to meet this requirement. The topic of substitute pay has come up in prior meetings, so we wanted to share a comparison of our substitute teacher pay with neighboring divisions, as well as the number of substitutes that we have in each category. This comparison shows divisions that we compete with for substitutes as opposed to our normal peer comparison or regional comparison groups. Our current pay for non-degreed substitutes with at least 60 semester hours is $65 per day, and we currently have about 20 substitutes in this category. And you can see that we have the lowest pay in this category. Our current pay for substitutes with a bachelor's degree or higher is $80 per day, and we currently have about 280 substitutes in this category. Our pay is in line with York for this category and $10 per day less than both Newport News and Gloucester. Our current pay for substitutes with a current teaching license is $80 per day, the same as teachers with a bachelor's degree or higher. We currently have about 20 substitutes in this category. As you can see in the chart, currently only Gloucester differentiates pay for licensed substitutes, paying $10 per day more than degreed subs. Our current pay for long-term substitutes is $105 per day. Currently, we have about 15 substitutes in long-term assignments. Again, our pay is comparable to York, but $20 or more lower than the other divisions. A few options to consider regarding substitute teacher pay increases are increasing the daily pay for substitutes with teacher licenses from $80 per day to $90 per day. We estimate that there are currently about 20 licensed substitute teachers in our pool of 300 plus substitutes. This incentive could entice more licensed teachers or retired teachers to become substitutes. We estimate that for the 2020-2021 school year, we might have at most 30 substitute teachers with licenses working 3 days a week for 40 weeks at the higher $90 per day rate, resulting in an incremental cost to WJCC of $36,000. Another option would be increasing the daily pay by $5 for all substitute teachers. The first third of this school year, our substitutes worked 2,700 days. Over the entire year, we estimate they would work 8,100 days. So a $5 daily pay increase for all substitutes for 8,100 days in a year would cost $40,500. Last option is increasing the daily pay by $10 for all substitute teachers. Using the estimate of 8,100 workdays in a school year, a $10 daily pay increase for all substitutes would cost $81,000.
I believe that's all of the additional information we have for you this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Have an opportunity to share our thoughts, ask additional questions, provide some guidance. Ms. Hummel?
So could you go back to the substitute screen? No, the one before that? Yeah. So when I look at that, the sub-teacher long-term really stands out to me because for me personally, I'm looking at those teachers that are spending a significant amount of time with with our students, and they're almost like the student's teacher. And so for me personally, I'm really concerned that we're the lowest paying division for our long-term teachers. That just seems really short-sighted. And if we could, because that's so important, the long-term teachers are the ones that are having to prepare the students for SOLs, they're having to prepare really teach the students. I was a sub, and I would say an extra $5 would be nice to get us a little bit above York, but my true concern here is really the long-term teachers. I think that's my personal critical issue. I don't know how the rest of the board feels.
Young?
Well, having been a teacher and a sub, I agree totally with what Ms. Hummel said. For one thing, when you're a long-term sub, if you're lucky, you have plans for maybe the first week, maybe 2 weeks, if depending on how long the teacher is planning on being out. But after that, you are the teacher. You do the planning, which you grade the papers. You're in charge, and so to pay them $105 a day, I think we could do a little bit better on that. And I mean, it's a lot of work to be a teacher, and a person stepping into that role is a teacher.
Commitment. I mean,
It is a
that
commitment.
a different commitment than.
They're not planning their schedule around their life. They're decided to be the teacher.
So maybe before I call on someone else, since we brought this up at the last meeting, I know Dr. Heron is looking for guidance from us, so if we could just stay on this topic for a few minutes, and so we can decide where we all are on this before we go into some other part of the budget. So, Mr. Kelly, were you about to say something?
Sure, I'll go straight to there versus where I was going to start. Do we have a problem getting long-term subs or substitute teachers?
No, we do not. So some of the guidance is quite strategic in trying to get licensed teachers to come in and sub who are
Sure.
not long-term subs.
Sure. And I see Hampton, New Kent, and West Point outsource their substitutes. Advantages, disadvantages, why not?
I don't think their fill rate is any greater than ours, but I'm not sure if Mr. Baker has any thought on that.
Talk about putting somebody in a hole.
It does become less personal. Teachers can't keep connections with teachers. It's a different experience.
My experience in HR and school divisions is when you outsource it, it actually doesn't save you the money, and you lose a lot of that customer service side of it. So I haven't seen that side. I haven't seen the benefit side of it.
Okay. I'm not sure which one of you answer this. So right now we have in the budget 3% for our teachers and support staff. If we adjust this by some number, that's the substitute teachers. Is there anybody in the school system who is not going to have their pay adjusted as a result of this budget? I'm talking substitute bus drivers. Are all of them getting the same 3%?
I believe substitutes are not included. Is that correct? Any
Substitute.
form of substitute that's not a full-time or actual employee of the system
In the 3%.
in the 3%.
So if we do this for substitute teachers, who is not going to get a raise?
Substitute bus drivers, substitute nurses,
Office workers, coaches,
substitute administrators.
Coaches are stipends, right?
their stipends, yes,
Right.
but they're not proposed to be
Right.
increased.
Okay.
Administrators, substitute administrators, like we've had one who's been consistently in our system for a period of time. So only actual employees are proposed currently for a raise.
Currently in the budget.
Correct, sir.
Right, because I've always, in my tenure here, is, okay, we gave a 2% raise, and then suddenly it's like, oh, this was an asterisk, that was an asterisk, this was an asterisk, and I didn't intend to have any asterisks, right? So I am on board with the substitute teachers at $10 a day. At I think the 80,000 is well within our budget capability, and I think even if we don't have an issue finding them, I just think showing that little bit of respect for them is appropriate. So that's kind of where I'm coming, and I would like to see all of our people who get a WJCC check get some sort of adjustment. Whether, I know the cafeteria workers, since they're only 6-hour employees, or maybe $10 isn't, maybe $5, but.
But the cafeteria workers are included, just not the substitute cafeteria
Correct.
workers.
The substitutes, right.
Just the
I
substitutes.
understand.
Yeah.
I understand.
So staying on this topic, Dr. Beers, did you have thoughts to add about this piece of the budget?
right now.
Ms. Young?
I just had a question. When was the decision made that the substitute pay was not included in any of the raises? Obviously that it hasn't been the case, but can that be changed?
We generally haven't included it because they're not full-time employees, and also we have a 90% fill rate with subs, and so you base it on market value. That's not to say we don't value the substitutes who are coming into our classrooms, but because of that, we didn't propose it as part of the original budget.
I don't want to wait until it's a problem,
I understand.
so I agree with Mr. Kelly.
Mr. Dow, did you have comments about this piece?
Yeah, and it's about this, but about, I guess, the whole process. I'm just curious, look closer, I'm just curious, because somebody mentioned, I think it was you, Julie, that said, Ms. Hummel, excuse me, $5 to get us to 110, that we'd leapfrog York County. Do we have any kind of indication from these other districts what they intend to do? So that
Not regarding substitutes, I haven't heard. I know I'm friends with my counterpart in York, and I think they actually used to be behind us, and they moved up to match us a couple of years ago.
So I know a big part of this conversation is us, positioning ourselves to be competitive. I think it would be helpful to know what these other districts intend to do so that we can remain competitive and not still be behind the curve. If we're increasing by $5 and York County does the same, that really didn't do much for us competitive-wise. So.
Is it fair to say that most school divisions don't include substitutes or part-time staff in salary increases?
That's correct.
So I think this kind of adjustment is something that happens every so many years when we realize that we're so out of whack with everybody else, as opposed to an annual salary increase. Dr. Beers?
Yeah, so I just want to go back to that one number, the 81,000, where it says increased daily pay for all teachers. That means the ones that have 60 hours or less as well? Does that mean all of them?
This is substitutes.
Yeah, substitute teachers.
Yeah.
So they're included. So if we did that, they would, the less than 60 hours would go from 65 to 75, correct? Okay, and then 80 would go, and then sub-teacher bachelor would go from 80 to 90, and then those currently holding would go to 90, and then the long-term would go to 115. And if it's only $81,000, that seems to be, it gets us closer in all the categories, and I know it's still $81,000. I know it's, but I would support if we could, if we find the money, I would do that. Because one of the I think the other part is one of the reasons Surrey has to pay $150. It's Surrey. This is a really attractive school system to be a substitute teacher, and I 150 would be great, but I don't think it's necessary. But I do think that $10, because then we're like, we're just below Surrey, but we're matched with Newport News and York. I'm looking at the subs who have teaching credentials, and I think that's good. We're not, with the long term, I appreciate what Mrs. Young said about that, because you do in fact become the real teacher, and you do all the stuff after school and all those other kinds of things. But 115 would get us, would be closer to anyway. I like the way that works out. I think that 81,000, the way that goes.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Ms. Young?
I just had a question about outsourcing. What does that actually mean? Do you mean there's an organization that has subs that these districts go to?
You can hire outside companies like Kelly Services and stuff like that. You know, people, have proposed that for other parts of the organization.
Well, I'm not
Some school-
supporting that. I just
Right.
was curious about that. Okay, I don't know if I was a Kelly person, if I'd all of a sudden want to be called into it. Unless you teach, you have no clue what it's all about.
One just quick question. Do you have is there a finite number of subs on our list? Or, I mean, is there a waiting list beyond the sub list?
So we're constantly adding them all throughout the year. It's a pretty moving target. We have about 300.
I just was curious.
And a lot of them we hire into teaching roles or other roles, and but it's about 300 we currently have.
Curious about that. Okay.
So I would concur with Dr. Beers, and I think many of my colleagues that just going ahead with the $10 a day across the board. So is there consensus? Do we have consensus to give direction to Dr. Herron to add that to the budget? So we'd be adding
Added to the budget, right?
adding 81.5 to the budget. Okay. So we've checked the box on that one. I know we all have comments about the budget, and so maybe it's just easy just to go round robin. And we can jump in maybe.
Teacher pay?
Let's tackle teacher pay. Let's do that. Let's start there, and then I know each of us have our own individual questions or concerns, so that's a good point. Let's start with teacher pay. Ms. Cook, would you like to start there? Ms. Cook, Ms. Young?
I think we've already said what we think.
Oh,
Say it again.
Well, I'm for the 4% because, first of all, I don't think we're being fair to our teachers unless we are bold. We talk about being bold. I think we have to do 4% because, number one, we want to retain our current teaching staff. I don't want to have HR all of a sudden having a lot of people resigning because York has more money, but there are other considerations. First of all, it's a morale issue. When I go to schools and I see what our teachers are doing, they do a lot for our kids. I'd like to honor that. I'd like to be at the forefront of doing the 4%. That's how I feel about it.
Ms. Cook?
I'd like to see more than 3%. 3.5 or 4. I think we should at least ask for it and try. And we may not be granted the money, and then we'll have some hard decisions to make. But I agree with Mrs. Young that we need to invest in our workforce, not just our teachers, but our entire workforce.
Exactly.
Mr. Dow?
Yeah, I definitely be in favor of a 4% raise for our teachers. I don't think anybody can debate the fact that our teachers are a direct investment into the success of our community. And so for that reason, and many others that have already been voiced and will be voiced, I'd be in favor of 4%.
I would be in favor of 4%. I just want to make everyone aware, what does that mean to our budget gap? Just because I think I misspoke. I know it's an additional million, but what is our gap now with a 4%?
The current proposed budget gap with the proposed, there's a $2 million gap.
Okay, so.
And this would mean a $3 million and
gap.
80,000.
Okay, so I just want to get that out there because I also am in favor of a 4% increase. But our funding partners need to also hear the message from our community that a 4% increase for our staff and teachers is critical. Because we can say till we're blue in the face how valuable our teachers are and that they need to be paid an increase of 4%, et cetera, but if our funding partners will not fund us, then our hands are tied. So yes, I support the 4%.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Kelly?
So when we say a gap, we're talking about a gap compared to what we were funded by the funding partners last year, as
Right.
opposed to, because they haven't really given us a proposal for this year as to what they're doing. And your slide here, you talked about salary increases from the governors, the House, the Senate, and the one craw I've always had with these types of slides is it doesn't say for SOQ positions only, and it doesn't say local composite index applied. So, so when I do some quick numbers for the SOQ positions, when I look at our budget, our non-SOQ positions are roughly about, so that we're gonna take all of those.
About half? 1,700?
I don't put everybody in the spot. I don't mean to do that. So, but, you know, we just have, think we need to make sure that we understand that when the House proposes 2% this year, 2% next year, that's 2%, 4% SOQ funded positions only, which we are above SOQ funded positions.
Everyone is.
Every
division.
Yeah, at some level. And the local composite indexes gets applied to that. So they're not really giving you 4%, even though that's what they'll say in their press conferences. That's not where they are. Just the other question too on the Senate, and this might be too much of a nit that nobody really knows the answer to. The 3% one-time bonus from the Senate, would that be applied to VRS? No. So
It's a bonus.
so that's a problem.
So really, if you get a 3% bonus, and then they take it away, and they say you give a 4% raise, it's almost like a 1% raise, you know? I know it's
Double
not
speak.
exactly. but
So,
it's-
from my point of view, right now we have in the budget 3%. I would like to see more than 3%. If we can get to 4%, that would be great. But I would like to see more than 3% if we can get there.
Dr. Beers, before I go to you and Ms. Hummel, I just, maybe to help clarify for the listening public as well, is it fair to say that for every state mandate, whether it's a teacher raise or mental health counselors, they give us approximately 26% to foot that bill? And then they demand that our localities, the city and the county, fund 74% of that. So just to make that clear, is that accurate?
I think our overall,
Local funding is
64%. Okay, so, but the state's footing about 26% of the bill.
Is it correct if we, the state says 3%, and then if we, even though they only are funding 26% of it, but if we have to do that, right?
In order to get their 26%.
In order to get the 26%, we have to do the 3%. So even if there's this funding gap, we have to do it, otherwise we lose the 24%? Is that correct?
yeah, basically, if you look at the three options on the salary slide that are sitting out there right now, the governor's budget proposes 3% in the second year of the biennium, and we are actually proposing it in the first year. Don't know what we'll propose next year. The House is putting 2% in both years, and the Senate is giving 4% in the second year. So we don't know where that's falling yet, but we do need to give the right percentage to get the amount of money.
Right, so if it's in the biennium budget, so if we give 3% this year, we don't have to give anything next year to get that 3%.
Correct.
Because it's in the biennium. Not that I'm saying that we're not going to give her any.
Careful.
Okay.
Dr. Beers?
Yeah, I like, everybody else, I do support the 4% raise. No, I know, we've got constraints, but I think, I think the governing bodies are gonna have to, they are gonna have to increase their contribution to our budget. Not gonna be static. One thing we don't know as well is there's that VRS rate increase, $850,000. And there's, I think it's more than an outside chance, but I don't know how far out that is, but there is a chance that the state may pick that up for us. They may do that once they, when the dust settles and they look farther, into this spring, if there's money left over, that's what our representatives have been telling us, and also that's what they're gonna push for. So we do as we do the best we can with what we have.
So when we talked about, I'll go back to my level funding. So we talked about level funding that we have, as we call that gap. And I think you mentioned at the last meeting that generally speaking, it's been about a 2.73%, 7% that we've gotten from this localities.
7 is the average, not counting the year Blair.
The average, not counting the year that we open Blair. And this, what we've got on the table right now is 2.3.
3.3.
So it's under what our typical increase from the localities is.
Ms. Young?
I just had a question. One of the things I was going through, it talked about a VRS hybrid. What does that mean if it says it's a hybrid?
VRS has 3 plans, Plan 1, Plan 2, and hybrid members. And hybrid members are those who became members of VRS if they were hired after January 1st, 2024, I believe. So all new teachers who come to us out of school, they're in the hybrid plan. So it's a hybrid, it's defined benefit and defined contribution plan.
They changed it. It's
Less
different.
robust.
Exactly, okay. Also,
A total defined benefits.
Total defined
plan,
benefit for Plan 1 and Plan
Right.
2.
which, and everybody's sort of going in that direction anyway. It's,
And
so
it-
those who have a defined benefits plan, that's pretty nice.
Ms. Young?
I just had one more question. Are we in a deficit, is James City County, Williamsburg, James City County Schools, are we in a deficit for retirement, for VRS? I mean, I'm asking because a few years ago, I know that Hampton owed millions and millions and millions of dollars because they hadn't kept up with VRS, but we're not in that situation,
So
are
we
we?
pay our required contributions
Okay.
into the teacher pool.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to make sure.
And that required contribution is increasing this year and accounts for 850,000
Right.
of the proposed budget.
Understand that.
Just to clarify that, though, so we keep up with our required match, but as a whole, at the state level, explain where VRS is for teachers. Like, isn't there a gap there? Like, that's not,
I think that's why there's an increase this year.
Right.
It's not fully secure, it's not insecure, but it's not fully secure.
so to
And-
answer your question, we do what we're supposed to do, but at the state level, it's not 100%.
Yeah, and I think of the ideas of this is increased and we need to fully fund the pension system for teachers at the state level, and then that impacts our state rating, our financial rating as a state as well, and locally.
That's
I
the
just, yeah, let me
It's a
just
state
one-
level thing.
Does that make us whole?
Let me say one thing about the VRS. For years, that was a cash cow for the General Assembly, and they used to borrow money out of that. And so part of what, has to happen, and it was managed, quite well, quite conservatively. And I think part of what's happening is trying to get that back. Because they did, they used it for infrastructure and and it's always been a well-managed plan, but it's like, you gotta pay the piper, and I think that's part of what's going on.
Thank you,
Which is,
Dr. Beers.
which is good, it's a good plan.
So I think I've heard from my colleagues, all of us are in agreement that more than 3, up to 4, somewhere in between,
I'm good with that.
3 and 4,
Get it.
but 3 is not enough.
Gives me-
Look forward to the guidance of the collective board as to whether we go 3.5% or 4. I'm hearing some difference of opinion, just to help us, because we'll be coming back with a definitive number for you to vote on and consider at the next meeting, but we want to be clear now as to what we want, what you need us to do.
How many colleagues think 4%?
Sure.
I I think it's 4%.
All right, thank you.
4%.
And 80,000 for substitute pay added as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so those, you're definitely looking for guidance there, and I think each of us have additional comments, thoughts, so maybe I'll just do round robin now, starting with Ms. Hummel. Nope, I'm starting with Mr. Kelly,
Sure.
ending with me.
So as we go through the school counselors, the current student ratio by SOQ, if we stick to the current proposal over the number of positions that we're hiring from the school, for the school counselors, where will we be on the ratio?
In the second year of the biennium, we will, if we hire 5 this year and 6 next year, we will hit 250 to 1. So I'm not quite sure we will be on the ratio this year. I don't think we've calculated that fully, but we've proposed 5 this year and coming back for 6 next year to go 250 to 1.
Does anybody know that if we go to 250 to 1, there's that many counselors out there in the Commonwealth that we can?
We've already advertised and are planning to get out ahead and get the best of the best.
Sure. Okay. I think that's all I had there. In the budget book, I noticed on page 55, National Board Teacher Supplement. Do we have nothing budgeted this year for the supplement?
This year and years past, that supplement has been budgeted in the regular salary line.
Okay.
So I just moved it for the fiscal year 21 budget.
So we just pulled it out of the.
Out of the regular salary lines.
Okay. Right. I think that's all I've got for now, Madam Chair.
Cycle back around and piggyback. We need a big piggy bank. Dr. Beers.
Yeah, I just have a question. I think I just need clarification. The request for the 3 additional assistant principals for the 3 high schools, I've looked at the response to your question, and I saw data provided with like school divisions represent schools that are similar in size and/or demographics. And I guess the question I have is, we don't have an equal number of students in all 3 of our high schools. Is it possible that one of the high schools needs another assistant principal and maybe the other one doesn't? I'm not persuaded that because other districts have 3 assistant principals, that's why we should have 3 assistant principals. So I'd like a little explanation about that. Okay.
Yeah, Dr. Worley has done some research, and we've looked at like districts and the size of schools. If Dr. Worley want to come up, and we'll get you to address the question. I think schools, the nature of schools are different as well, and the percentage of free and reduced lunch in a school can also impact, and the percentage of special education students can also impact the need for an extra assistant principal. So it's not just a one factor when we look at numbers. But Dr. Worley, what is?
Do we have one of our high schools that has, more of those 2 factors at work? Is one of our high schools?
Gore Hill has a larger percentage of special education students and also the largest number of students. Well, Jamestown has a.
War Hill has the most students than Jamestown, than Lafayette. But what we're seeing, I was looking at 5-year trend data, and I can provide a little more data for you all. But one of the things that I was noticing, even over 5 years, I think, I don't have that chart right in front of me, but I went up like 100 overall. Our schools are up like 122. One school's up 199 students, but all of our at-risk groups are up, 50%. So you might have 122 new students overall, but we've got well over 100, maybe close to 150 that are representative in one or more of the at-risk groups.
And that's for all 3 schools?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes.
Because we have a smaller overall student population at Lafayette High School.
Correct. Right, but the needs that we're seeing of our students across the board with social and emotional issues, with the needs of our at-risk students, that's growing. And anytime that you're in a high school, and you all are really familiar with that, it's almost like being in a little city, and the needs of our students are growing, and the amount of time that they spend at school, that our administrators spend with them, it grows because they're very busy.
So will the responsibilities of these three different assistant principals, will they be the same? Will they be different? Is somebody going to be targeting this part of the operation of the school and somebody,
I think
or
that
is it just, okay,
we would look at the
got three.
needs of the school, and typically in a situation like that, the students are divided by alphabet or caseload, and it gives the principal the opportunity to also be the true instructional leader, to be out and visible and support the administrators as they're dealing with, one thing can happen in a school day and one AP is out of, cannot support anything the whole day if they're involved in something. But also back to the original question, comparing to our like and surrounding school divisions, noticing that even some of our school divisions that are like school divisions, I've noticed looking at the data, they have even more schools, so their ratio of administrator to student is naturally smaller because they're smaller areas. And around here, we do have school divisions that are much larger, and the high schools are larger, and they have 5 administrators or more. So there are definitely some more clarifying data points I can provide for you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Worley. And I guess just to add to that, just again, like comparing us to York County in one of the SBQs, it's clear we have significantly more students with disabilities in our division, and we have more economically disadvantaged students. And I think it's fair to say we probably have more L students than even some of our next door neighbors. So that impacts student need. Dr. Pierce,
That's it. No, that was it.
I just had a question on page 53 where it's talking about school board services. Oh, you have that question too? Okay. I'm looking at the difference from 2019. It went from approximately 249,000, 249,000, and then it jumped to 378, and then we're guessing for next year we're going to need 438. I'm just wondering where are these increases coming from? It's line 2110.
I'll have to get the information for you regarding from 19 to 20, but from budget 20 to budget 21, that function, school board services, is actually within multiple cost centers. It's within the superintendent's cost center for like board travel and stuff, but it's also in the communications cost center for some contractual obligations that we have, and that's where the multilingual communication app is budgeted. We've also moved School Messenger out of technology into communications because they're the ones that manage that tool. And then within the finance cost center, our annual audit is budgeted there, and it's proposed to increase a few $1,000s.
It's under the broader function of school board services, but all those department are underneath that.
Part of it. Okay, I just didn't, that's why I asked. Okay, thank you. That's the only question I had.
Ms. Cook.
Dr. Herron mentioned that next meeting we're poised to adopt the budget. And so assuming today's conversation goes well, I just wanted to say that I'm ready to support it pending the 4% that we agreed on and then the substitute pay. So I do appreciate this. It's an outstanding effort on behalf of you and the staff, so thank you. I just wanted to get that out there. I also wanted to talk about, we were talking about historically what our funders have contributed, and on page 23 of the budget, when we project out, per usual, it does suggest that we are going to, by 2025, experience a nearly $4 million gap, even if there is an increase in funding at the average rate. Is that what, am I reading that correctly?
You are, and because of where we place the 10th elementary school in our CIP, I've also included additional personnel in that year. So that's why it's jumped so high that year.
Yeah, so I thank you for including that, but this is a perpetual issue that I just think that when, especially at the first year of a biennium budget, we should really, talk to our funding partners about that, unless and until the state significantly changes what it's doing, that gap is going to continue to grow as our student needs continue to grow and as our population continues to grow a little bit. So I want to bring that up. I also wanted to talk about buses and trailers. So buses, there's 2 buses proposed in this, and typically we want to buy
A total of 4 in the superintendent's proposed budget.
2 extras.
Yes, there's
Sorry,
2 extras.
2 extras, so a total of 4, my bad.
Total of 4.
So that's a gap of how many if we're,
6 buses if we're going to purchase 10 per year.
okay, so if we are going to purchase 10, then we need to, through the course of the year, either do budget transfers to purchase more or ask again at the end of the year. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I think the intent is over time, as we're able to build more buses into the operating budget. So we're starting, we had 2 last year, we're trying to keep 2 extra in the budget this year. Next year, we would try to build that capacity even more and not rely on end-of-year funding, which has been our pattern for buying buses, which is not ideal.
No, because if gas increases or if there's some other, supply chain issue around the country, then that could, okay. And then trailers. I want to circle back to, I guess, 2 points. First of all, in this proposed budget, we're asking for trailers at 2 schools, correct?
That's correct.
But we have 3 schools that are above 100, 4 schools that are over 100%, but one of them already has trailers. That's Matthew Whaley. So can you talk a little bit about Matoka and whether that needs a trailer or not?
I'll ask Mr. Walker to speak to that, because the quick answer is yes. The conservative way we've approached it was to try to reconfigure space for 1 year, because we were hoping that the design of an elementary school would start next year and we would be able to cope with crowded space a little bit longer. But depending on whether that happens or not, ultimately we do need a trailer at Matoka and possibly some other schools as well. Mr. Walker.
So yes, it is tight at Matoka. They're currently at 102%. Their square footage is slightly larger than Stonehouse. Now that doesn't always equate to more classroom space, but currently based on projections and teacher ratios and allocations, we're looking at there's 1 additional room at Matoka that could be repurposed into the calculations for effective capacity. It would put us right in line, but it's right on the edge.
So if we decide to go with the proposal this year, in the following year, we could be facing trailers at Matoka and perhaps other schools.
Possibly Norge and possibly JBB as well, James J.B. Blayton.
We're both at 97% capacity right now.
Can I jump in on your trailer thing real quick? So we've got funding for trailers at elementary and high schools, so that's just so we make sure Jamestown?
Right.
And the other elementary right now?
Stonehouse.
We saw the video about Norge. So Norge had space needs.
Right.
We know we have an issue at Matoka. What other schools would we be looking at putting trailers at?
J.B. Blayton is at 97%.
Yes, that's correct.
And if you really look at the ratio of teachers to students in a school with 70% free and reduced lunch, James River is full.
Right. And
it's not even in the equation right now.
Right, and if we look at those, equity needs, James River wouldn't be
Correct.
a poor choice. So we're looking at trailers in either next year or the year after at 5 of our elementary schools.
Potentially.
And if we pull pre-K out of there, that doesn't change the metrics.
Not for the schools that are currently at 100%.
Right, so that's, so pre-K is not our problem there, it's our elementary school population, and that's why we would have to go with trailers at those facilities, and not because of any kind of pre-K issue. So, okay, I just want to make sure that I understood that so that I could communicate that appropriately.
And I think if we consider back to the video of Norge, which really put the issue in perspective and give us a visual of it, what we continue to do is to capture space that wasn't originally intended for classroom space to be used as classroom space, and therefore we're tutoring students in hallways. So we have done an incredible job of making do, but unfortunately, teacher salary is one thing, but teacher working conditions and also conditions for learning for students are less than adequate.
Well, precisely, I mean, because a lot of those places that were captured for learning are for small groups, and the more needs that our students have, the more small group learning that we need to have, and that requires space, and that takes away from our teacher professionals, that, you know, because every place was a, you know, a planning room or a teacher workroom, and, you know, we're taking those things away from our staff. So it's really a compounding problem, and I think it's not tied. So right now we have space for trailers. Are we comfortable with the 435 number, or do we think it should be more?
If we go ahead, if an elementary school is not imminent, then we need to plan to put trailers at other schools.
In next year or the year after?
We would probably need to start the planning now and do it during next year, so we probably should add money to the budget for additional trailers or a trailer now.
Okay, so I don't know that we need to do that now. We can wait till the next meeting, but that's just something we need to have in our mind, that may be an increase that we're gonna have to go do.
I mean, it would be, just for the purpose of illustration, it would be really helpful to, I'm sorry, didn't I interrupt you?
No, I was just saying next.
I mean, if we were to put all of our schools at 90%, how many trailers would that mean? You know? I mean, seriously. I mean, but to allow for that teacher workspace, to allow for small group instruction, to allow for music teachers to not have to move their equipment every single day, twice a day. So what would that look like? And to have every single school in our division at 90%, which we know is optimal for staff morale, student instruction, meeting student needs, so people aren't having occupational therapy behind a curtain. How many trailers would that mean?
So that would be 8 over 9 elementary schools.
But how many trailers total? It would be more than one.
Well, it
more
could
than
be
one double wide at each
correct.
school,
It
right?
could
I
be.
mean,
Yes, it could be. 8 of the 9 are at 90% or higher.
Right.
With capacity.
Right, so they would require trailers, and we could probably look at it at both elementary and the middle school level. I'm not sure that the high school level, since we're gonna be doing expansions.
Right.
In the relatively near term, I think, but.
Maybe,
right, but those would be interesting numbers to have, just as data points in conversations, to understand that at each individual level, how many trailers would be necessary to.
'cause it might be
accommodate that
more
need.
than one trailer at each school. It might be several.
Right.
Two or more. Ms. Young?
I was just going to say also, if we are ever going to be able to seriously do something about student-teacher ratio, you have to have space. I mean, we cannot continue I mean, we hear it, you know, from people that would like us to reduce the number of students per teacher, but unless you have a place for that teacher to have a classroom, you can't do that. We're just going to have to use the space that we currently have available, and that means more students per classroom, and that's the bottom line. And so in order to do that, we really need to have a new school, a new elementary school. So I support that.
Thanks, Ms. Young. Before I go back to the round robin, I just wanted to add, before we get too far away, that Mr. Kelly mentioned that, and our space needs are impacting our teachers because we've taken away their space, their planning space, but it also impacts our students. So as we've said, but I just wanted to make it really clear, like, we don't have dedicated band space. And the students who are receiving services in the hallways, under the stairwells, behind curtains, are our students with the most needs. So while we're doing a great job of meeting student needs, the environment that they're in is not
Serving them well.
Serving them well. So I'm going to go to Ms. Cook, and then Ms. Hummel, and then Mr. Dow.
I just have one more topic, and that's equity, because, yes, thank you. So there are a lot of paths to equity, a lot of different ways you can approach it. But I think this budget proposal goes a long way to that end. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the FTEs that have been added. So Ms. Ewan, how many total FTEs have been added in this budget? Do you know that off the top of your head? I think I do, but I don't want to get the math wrong.
31.
That's, okay, 31, that was, okay. So the vast majority of those further equity, in my view, whether it's 5 new counselors, 8 new sped staff, ELL teachers, student services specialists, behavior interventionist specialists, English language learner, family outreach, additional high school APs, additional Bright Beginnings AP, all of those positions impact equity, and this is significant. And I cannot underscore that enough. It's building a human infrastructure to support kids, and I have no doubt it will help support it fully, and I support it fully and appreciate the data to justify every single solitary position. You know, we are anticipating generally level enrollment, slightly down next year. So some people could ask, why are we asking for more positions? And I think that's really a fair question. But these increases reflect student need, and they're justified, and I just want to say that publicly. But again, I think these positions should be questioned, so I think staff can attest that I asked a lot of questions, right? And I looked at the data, and this budget proposal is not out of line from any lens that I can find. And I want to say that compared to other divisions, by function, by object category, it's right in line. We are not an outlier. When you look at historical funding from James City County, whether it's the average increase year over year, even with the raise, or the percentage of their funding as our whole budget, in neither way is this out of line. So it is an increase. It's a lot of positions. It's driven by data, but it is in no way, shape, or form an outlier, and I just think it's important to understand that. So I support the increase in staff, because it will directly help students, and it'll help teachers help students, because it'll provide relief to them by having an extra human infrastructure and central office, but more importantly, in the buildings. I do think going forward, we're going to have to address the allocation of resources by student need, by class size. That's why I think trailers are important to investigate, because we need the classroom space now. We needed it yesterday. And if it's not going to come in the form of a 10th elementary school, we're going to have to look at other ways to meet that need, to address higher percentage of free and reduced lunch like we are at James River. So I hope future budgets begin to look at that. But I just want to say there's more than one way to address equity, and I think this budget goes a long way towards doing that. So I appreciate that. That's all I got.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Ms. Hummel?
My colleague, Ms. Cook, is so eloquent. I just want to say, yes, I agree with everything you're saying, so I don't have to say it again. My, slightly unrelated, but when I hear about trailers, I wanted to ask Mr. Snipes if the security, contract assessment is going to take into account the trailers. That
More of them.
more and more of them at potentially sites that are not currently having trailers. Because that could add, that, anyway, I just wanted to throw that out. Just add that to your plate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Mr. Dowell?
My one question is not related to a new school or learning cottages that I got to visit. Trailers, learning cottage. They like learning cottage. So if I don't want to divert from that, if there are other pieces that need to be touched on
I think,
good?
we will cycle back around, and if the folks have additional.
So my one question was on page 9 of the budget book, adjust teachers' starting salaries to become more competitive. I couldn't find an actual number what that new starting salary might be. Can you touch on that, what that might look like?
What happens when we get to approval of the budget, whether it's, 3.5%, 4%, it's going to be now, then we'll start to build the salary scale to match that. And last time we built the scale, we put a little bit more emphasis on the beginning salary.
So not sure yet.
It's not built
Okay,
yet because
okay.
we're not sure of the percentage, because there's a tremendous amount of work going in to actually build the scale.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Beers?
Yeah, I've really, I'd almost forgotten about this, but in response to a question from Mr. Dow about the quantifying the annual funding that's budgeted for gifted ed versus that which is budgeted for underperforming and at-risk students, there's a little chart that came along with that, and I'm troubled by the trends that I see in here. I completely understand the fact that the funding for special education continues to go up, has every single year from $13,369,000. The budget now is $15,180,000. But what bothered me is I saw the career and technical and the gifted and talented programs. And I see a reduction of 6.4%, and in gifted, a reduction of 10.5%. And I would suggest those students are also part of our school system. And I hope that's not a trend. I hope, I certainly can't believe it's because the number of students that are being identified for the G&T program or those who are going into career and technical courses. I can't believe that those numbers have dropped. So I don't really know what the explanation is, except that, well, we need money from here, so we're going to move it over there. And adult education, I see an increase of 15.1%. So they're just, I'm hoping those aren't trends. That sometimes we don't always pick that up when we're just looking at, our budget, and I don't think I've really seen it that way before.
Well, and then I just have a couple comments to add on to that when I saw Mr. Dow's question and the this same chart that was provided in a SPQ. So I when we're looking at-risk students, where would we find the equity line that we identified? Because that is a line item and a pot of money that we have that we've used in specific schools to provide additional resources. So I don't think this reflects everything that we're doing.
Correct.
And there may be some additional.
Yeah, and that's mainly been focused on school resources and staffing, and I think it's currently in the Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Instruction budget.
So I guess my point is this is not a true, it's not exactly accurate in terms of how much money is going for different subgroups.
It's very hard to
'Cause-
capture. I mean, special ed funding you can capture more easily because
Yeah.
it's a separate entity.
Right.
Specialized teachers you can capture. Title I funding you can capture, but it's hard to capture all of the other things that are actually meeting the needs of individual students.
But we have, but we have, like in G&T, we have 15 FTEs. So, we know we have that. So, that's really going to be a cost. But I suppose there are questions about curriculum for the G&T kids and some of the other things. And I'm just, it surprised me. I'm sorry. That surprised me to see that kind of a drop when this school division for a long time has really supported efforts to work with those kids and provide opportunities for them. That's all.
Programmatically, there's been no changes to diminish the program in any way, but we certainly can look into why that particular change is in this fiscal year. Any idea?
Okay, yeah. 'Cause
No, I'll just say that the majority of those funds are for positions. So if there's been change in people
So they're just-
and changes in their benefit selections, that would affect those numbers.
Right.
But I can
10%, but dropping 10%.
And then if you look at this year's, because that chart in that response was comparing budget 19 to budget 20.
that's right.
So comparing budget 20 to budget 21, both
Right.
of those are going
Right.
up.
No,
Yeah, so this year's budget and the new budget book, they're both going up again.
Okay.
So it could have been a change in personnel and
Okay.
benefits and things like that.
I'll check that real carefully. I'm curious. But that just, and it surprised me, that's all. Okay, I'm done.
Just one more clarifying thing. So to give an example, if we retired a teacher who was in gifted and we hired a new teacher to replace her, then there would be a reduction there. Is that accurate? So again, it's not diminishing the program, but maybe there's personnel changes. I have a couple of thoughts and questions, and then I'll cycle back around to everybody else. Don't go anywhere yet, Ms. Ewing. So I did want to say I echo everything that Ms. Cook said, but wanted to thank staff. And I think what's great with this budget is how we have aligned it with each of the goals, and that's the public can see that and they can see how much money is going for equity. And I think it's so important that we invest those dollars in SPED and English language learners and security and technology. And so I wholeheartedly support this budget. I had a couple of little picky questions. We all asked lots of questions, and it helped us understand the budget. And so thank you, staff, for answering all those. And I know there's still more coming. But I think this does make a difference. We've listened to community members. We recognize that equity is something that we need to focus on. And as Ms. Cook said, having those positions for SPED and L are so critical. It's not enough. It's still not enough. But I think we're moving the needle. And so I appreciate that. And then, yeah, I've got some picky questions, but I can send those SBQs. I won't go there right now. So are there additional comments or feedback? Kelly?
So right now what's before us is the superintendent's proposed budget, and the General Assembly requires that we put together a budget of need. I think when we look at the substitutes, the trailers might be something we need to change, teacher salaries. I'm fully ready to support this as the school board's proposed budget with those additions. You look at each line item of the major budget changes, and you look at that, and I can't see of any one of those that is not a need. The fact that our kids are coming to us with more needs, even if we, as a school system, we do not grow, our percentage of special ed students is growing, our percentage of ELL students is growing, our percentage of free and reduced lunch students is growing. And what that requires us to do is lower our teacher-student ratios so that our teachers can serve those needs. So, so the added, I'm not concerned about the FTEs that are being added by this budget, because that is going to serve our students. And, even with the IT stuff, just serving our students with greater security and the things that are necessary for a modern functioning body. So I appreciate all the work that was put in to put these budget together by Renee, Dr. Herron, staff, everybody. I know it's a big effort, and I appreciate all the great work that was done to do that. And with the changes we talked about tonight, I'm fully prepared to support this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Are we ready to support this budget? To vote yes for this budget at the next, on
The
St.
changes
Patrick's Day?
that were added,
Mhm.
yes.
So, yeah, for substitutes, for salary, for trailers.
Madam Chair, just a point of clarification, we've only got the 2 trailers in the budget currently. Does the board want to add one more from Matoka, the one school, remaining school over 100% right now?
For me, right now, I think we should just hold that number steady, and then just see where that goes over the next couple of weeks when we get to our next meeting, where we have to either vote it or modify it and come back for a special meeting. So I think right now, I'm prepared just to hold that trailer number where it is.
Soon.
Thank you.
What's this with that, with regard to Matoka?
I just had a question.
Ms. Young?
If we hold it without getting the trailer from Matoka, does that take away the teacher workspace?
Yes,
mean,
that one space would be converted
Because,
to
I
a
mean,
classroom.
That's the question I have, because you said that there was a space available, but it would have to be, the purpose would have to be changed, so that would be, okay, thank you.
Which is what we've done so many times in all of our buildings.
Too many times.
Too many times.
Universally.
Right, but the hope is that in 3 years, we have a new school and we redistrict and bring all those spaces back.
Perfect.
Plan. Any additional thoughts or comments before we move on to policies? Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Okay, moving on to policies. Item 9.1, revised policy AFA, evaluation of school board operational procedures. Am I punting this to you or Dr. Beers?
Sorry, I just took all mine. Does anyone have any questions about
Are there
it?
questions for Dr. Beers or Ms. Hummel? Sounds like there's no questions, so this will just roll over to the next agenda. 9.2, revise and recode policy IND to IE, moment of silence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Walker will present the policy.
Good evening, Madam Chair, school board members, Dr. Herron. We are suggesting revising and recoding policy IND to IE, the moment of silence. Recoding to align to VSBA policy, and slight revisions were noted in the red line, removing the phrasing about students remaining seated and the redundant statement near the end about praying aloud.
Have questions for Mr. Walker?
My only question is, the teacher is responsible for each class to make sure that each student remains silent and does not disrupt. I'm not sure how we make sure that the teacher make sure that each student is silent.
Typically happens in the morning during like morning announcements, Pledge of Allegiance, school news, those types of things. That's why we wanted to allow some flexibility with that part of the policy with being seated. Many of the students are still standing from the Pledge of Allegiance, and that's when they will immediately take
I
them
understand
into the
that.
moment
It's
of
just
silence.
responsible.
It doesn't say that they're responsible for successfully making sure. It just means that they're responsible. Their lead.
I don't know what else I would put there, but that's okay.
Any additional questions? Thank you, Mr. Walker.
All right, thank you.
So we're going to move on to item 9.5, recode and rename policy JFCJ, possession of for use of weapons prohibited, to JFCD, weapons in school. Ms. Bourgeois.
Ms. Bourgeois.
Madam Chair, Dr. Herron, members of the board, we are bringing before you the weapons policy. It has been reviewed by our attorney. It actually was originally written by them, so they have reviewed it to make sure it still stays in line with all state and federal requirements. Our only recommendation for this policy is that we rename it to JFCD, weapons in schools, to align with the naming conventions for VSBA. It's easier to find. And other than that, there are no actual changes to the body of the policy itself recommended.
Bourgeois.
So as I look at the first sentence, so for me, it would be clearer if it says possession or use of a weapon on school property at a school-sponsored activity or going to and from school, comma, whether operable, yada, 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 is prohibited. Because right now, that the on-school property gets kind of confused to me. I know exactly what the intent of the sentence is, but if I was...
We are missing Holly.
My diagram is, my middle school English teacher, a diagram that sentence, I don't know if it totally works, but.
I think the intent is to put all the information regarding the description of the weapon together and then identify where.
But we don't really say where, it's more of a comma.
Line 8 says where.
Line what?
Line 8.
on school property at a school-sponsored event.
So any item that can be or is used as a weapon to start a fire in a school building on school property, it says to start a fire, comma, in a school building, comma,
Oh, I got you.
or school property, comma.
I got you, okay.
So if I put that in the beginning, possession or use of a weapon in a school building, on school property, da-da-da-da.
I agree with you. Yeah.
Then, whether operable or inoperable.
It just makes it cleaner. Can we run that past the attorney? Just make it cleaner
Or just get one of our ninth grade English teachers.
to look at it.
That would save us some money.
That would save us some money.
It would, I'm serious, it would save us some money. We don't have to go to the attorney to rewrite the sentence so it's clear.
Yeah, I don't think I don't
Doesn't
think,
change the intent of the sentence.
I don't find it difficult to understand the meaning of that paragraph the way it's written out. I always suspect text that has that many commas in it because it tends to have things get away, and I think that's,
Yes.
I guess something that Kelly's talking about. It probably, I hadn't really thought about it, that probably could be reworked so that it's a list of items, and basically you are prohibited from doing those. And I'm not gonna take the time right now to do that.
Just throwing that out there.
So what are we
you-
asking her to do?
I think it should be relooked.
Let's be clear, what are we asking her to do?
Well, Mr. Kelly, you stated the sentence the way it should be written. I agree
And we
with
can-
you,
and we
so
don't
why
have to
don't you
agree-
just restate the
Right,
sentence?
we don't have
so
to
that-
agree with them. Come on, we can vote this up or down, and we don't have to agree.
I've already
Except
moved
that-
on. I gotta go back
I
now.
want you to go back.
Would you like me to read what I've noted to
Go
make
for
sure
it.
it captures it, Mr. Kelly? Possession or use of a weapon in a school building or on school property at a school-sponsored activity or going to or from school, whether operable or inoperable, including but not limited to.
Yep. It's prohibited.
That section
Yeah.
is prohibited,
Oh,
and all the
perfect.
rest is prohibited.
Perfect.
So,
Okay, we're
I
good.
think we can move that.
We're moving on. Okay. Moving on to item 9.6, review policy JFCF, alcohol and drugs.
Again, this also is being revised. It was last revised in 2014. We have gone through the same process with the attorney. Again, this one has been written specifically by the attorney to make sure that we are meeting all required mandates, and there are no changes recommended at this time. I did check with legal counsel regarding the decriminalization of marijuana. That is a civil change that the legislation is pursuing. It does not address any of our school codes, so there would not be any change to our requirements for this year.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Bourgeois? Wait.
Sorry, I just closed out of board docs, I'm
Um,
sorry.
I'm fine. It's I looked at maybe excluded the voluntary surrender. Since the word may is in there, I'm good, because that,
Moving on to item 9.7, revised policy KJ, advertising in the schools.
June's coming back again tonight.
Agenda item is to revise policy KJ, advertising in schools. This policy was originally adopted in 1974 and has had no revisions since that time. Revisions to the policy include updating legal and cross-references, as well as clarifying on lines 14 through 16 that establishments whose primary source of revenue is the sale of intoxicants or other products prohibited on school grounds cannot advertise in school publications. Changes proposed to the policy are reflective of our current practices. Our attorney has reviewed, as well as the policy committee, and recommend approval as the policy as presented.
Have questions for you, Mr. Kelly?
so would intoxicants are allowed on school grounds?
So local breweries cannot buy a page in the yearbook,
Or the, or the
whatever, yeah,
musical
or the.
program, right?
Hey, we had a lot of fun in policy committee on this particular policy.
Because I would have just taken out of intoxicants and just say it's the sale of products prohibited on school grounds. So,
So gun shops can't.
That's what
Right,
we-
because it's prohibited on school grounds. Alcohol
Yeah,
prohibited on
yeah,
school
sure.
grounds.
That's the
Vaping's prohibited on
products
school ground.
prohibited. That's why we added that.
I see.
product.
That's why we added that
I
line,
got it.
just to, come up with a blanket.
That's just why I would take out of intoxicants, because
Caffeine.
it's caffeine and intoxicant. There you go.
Really matter.
So primary source of revenue. So a gas station that sells
Right.
beer, you can still advertise.
That's why we said,
Right, a primary source,
Yeah,
right?
that's on its
A
primary.
restaurant, primary source is
Right.
food, but they
So
also
the cheese shop could buy a page?
Right. But the brewery couldn't.
No,
Right. So,
but they can contribute other ways, so it's not, it's not meant to be punitive.
so anyway, I would wordsmith of intoxicants, but I'm good.
It's cooked too. So are we asking?
So you would just say, no, so you can't, yeah, then you have to, no, let's leave it the way it is.
So do we have consensus that we want to remove the word intoxicants, or is this just Mr. Kelly?
Or is it just Mr. Kelly? I feel a little bit demeaned, per usual. Or demeaned.
So what would you say, whose primary source of revenue is or are products prohibited on school grounds?
Right.
Is that what you'd say?
is the sale of products prohibited on
Right,
school?
exactly.
So just remove the of intoxicants or. That's fine with me.
Is everyone okay with that? Okay.
Yeah, that's okay, I can do
Thank you,
that.
Mr. Kelly.
I like this policy because it allows the schools to sometimes convey information that isn't necessarily core business, but when it comes to Medicaid expansion or census, things that impact our work indirectly, it allows the superintendent to do that, which is good.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Item 9.8, revised policy KQ, commercial, promotional, and corporate sponsorships and partnerships.
This policy was originally adopted in 2006 and has had no revisions since that time. Revisions to the policy include deleting lines 26 through 28, which authorize principals to enter into agreements for sponsorships and partnerships, as that is not reflective of our current practice. Currently, either the superintendent or myself signs all contracts and agreements for the school division. The Policy Committee has also recommended deleting lines 36 through 43, which discusses a sponsorship review committee that we have never implemented since the policy's inception in 2006.
So we don't have one,
We don't need it.
don't need it.
And other revisions include updating legal and cross-references. The changes presented do not change our current practices. Our attorney has reviewed as well as the Policy Committee and recommends approval as presented.
Why did you come to me automatically? I'd put a period at the end of 33 and delete everything on 34.
Right at the end of year.
Because we took out the $5,000 value in lines 26 through 28, that the 5,000 doesn't matter anymore. So I would just put a period at the end of year and then delete
Line
134.
Consensus there? Okay, here we go. Moving on to action items.
You caught that, Jen. That's good.
10.1.
We caught lines 35 through 42.
I think I don't read these things.
Is there a motion to approve?
Madam Chair, I
personnel
move approval of
actions?
the personnel actions as presented this evening.
Is there, thank you.
Okay.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Surza?
Ms. Cook?
Aye.
Mr. Dowell?
Aye.
Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Dr. Beers?
Aye.
Ms. Omby?
Aye. Item 10.2, award a contract for construction services for the operations bus garage HVAC to Warwick Mechanical Services in the amount of $150,973. Is there a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that we award a contract for construction services for the operations bus garage HVAC to Warwick Mechanical Services in the amount of $150,973.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Let's get it done. Poor
Long
guys.
since overdue. Thank you, staff, for coming to support this. Thank you. No additional discussion. Hearing none. Ms. Surza?
Mr. Dowell?
Aye.
Ms. Hummel?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Aye.
Mrs. Young?
Aye.
Dr. Beers?
Aye.
Ms. Cook?
Aye.
Ms. Omby?
Aye. Okay, moving on to 11.1, board members' comments. Mr. Dowell, I'll start with you.
I don't have anything tonight. Thank you.
Ms. Cook?
I just want to thank the Williamsburg-James City County Schools Foundation for coming here tonight and for doing the wonderful work that they do.
Thank you. Ms. Young?
I am so happy that that was just approved, that contract. Mr. Dell and I were over at operations, and Mr. Snipes was kind enough to take us into the garage and show us where this was going to be, and they were already clearing out space for it. I know that the staff there is very excited, so I'm excited for them. I enjoyed our visit there. I thought it was interesting. I always enjoy meeting over at operations. I really enjoyed my visit at Matthew Whaley for Read Across America, and enjoyed reading with Mr. Nixon's adorable little first graders, which was, he really has those kids in line. I was very impressed. Good job, Mr. Nixon. And also enjoyed being at Berkeley Middle for the School Foundation Awards, and just seeing and just hearing the amount of money was just kind of awesome. It's fabulous that, $71,000 is nothing to sniff at, and enjoyed seeing all of the excited they were. So.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Dr. Beers?
Yeah, I would like to recognize and thank staff that were in all the schools today where primary voting went on, and I understand some areas it was quite heavy. Not an incident, nothing happened, and they are to be really thanked for keeping things running as smoothly as it did. I'd also like to thank the WJCC School Foundation for its continued support of our teachers with the growing number of grants. I would also like to mention something to the member directors of that board. Many of them are quite influential in our community, and they could be quite helpful in contacting their either city council member or the member of the Board of Supervisors that represent them, and letting them know that they are in full support of our school system and the budget that we have come up with to support our schools. Anyway, it's just a thought that it might be helpful. Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I was disappointed to be out of town last week on company travel for Read Across America and the Schools Foundation event. I look forward to both of those days, and I was disappointed to not be there. I do want to send my thanks to the Schools Foundation for the grants and the hard work that board does in serving our community. I've talked to several people who've donated, and they say it's the greatest charity in town and really impactful. I would like to, just as a point of order, to the next year or the next time that they give a grant, have a grant day, is to put them on our agenda versus holding them to a 3-minute citizen comment period, just to give them more time to speak versus having to be beholden to that 3 minutes, because I think it would be good. It'd be good for us to kind of get more information as far as what grants they were given, and more opportunity for us to thank them in person for the great work that they do. And also, I'd like to send my congratulations to the Jamestown High School Scholastic Bowl team. They're 3-year defending state champions. If you've never seen that event, it is completely humbling and a tad bit humiliating about what the questions these kids answer. I don't even know the questions. I don't understand the question, and these kids know the answers, and it was really very impressive. And so, if you haven't been to a Scholastic Bowl, particularly at the state level, it's well worth the trip. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Hummel?
Thank you. I was busy last week. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I felt like I was very glad that I have a supportive boss for my real job, because on Tuesday I spent half the day on the yellow school bus going around, which is a happy thing because it's a lot, there were a lot of grants to give out, so it was basically from 8 until almost 1, right? That we were on that bus, and that was only half of the awards given. And then on Wednesday, Mr. Dowell and I went with Dr. Heron, and we gave out the Reflections Awards, which was always fun to see all of our budding artists in the community, or all the creative talent. And then on Thursday, we did the Read Across America at Matthew Whaley, and I had the pleasure of going into Miss Watkins' class, and it doesn't really take more than one, like, I don't know, two books that you're reading to a group of first graders to know that, number one, we should be giving our teachers the 4% raise, and 2, we should also increase any sub-pay. I mean, it's like everyone just needs to spend about an hour in the life of one of our teachers to totally support a 4% raise. So that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. That's a great way to describe that.
And they were lovely. I don't want to give the impression that the kids were not lovely. It's just, it's a lot to manage.
It's intense. It's intense. And Monday we had agenda prep.
Oh, we had, yeah, I forgot about
It was the whole
Monday.
week.
It was the whole week.
It was the whole week. So, like my colleagues, I think some of the activities that we attended last week are the funnest, can I say? So certainly enjoy the foundation. It's not a word. So, but going on the bus and handing out the grants is fun, and it's great to see the smiles on the teachers' faces and their students in their classrooms are always so excited. And so I always look forward to that, as well as Read Across America. So again, having an opportunity to be in the classroom to read Green Eggs and Ham is always a highlight. It's definitely fun because the work that we do, making recommendations for budget and policy, is certainly sometimes tedious and takes a lot of time, but it's the balance is being in the classrooms and talking to our teachers and being with our students. And then I just wanted to share, also last week, Lafayette, Berkeley, and James Blair held, I think this is the second time the band has done a pre-assessment concert. So it's an opportunity for those bands to have guest judges listen to them play before they go to their state assessment. But the other thing that I applaud and hope that maybe we could do that across the division in other schools, and maybe we are, is that the middle school kids purposely get to watch the high school band students perform. And then the high school director is there to talk to the middle school students and the middle school parents about high school marching band and concert band. And so as students are making their schedules right now, I have an idea of what that looks like. And so that's just always really fun to watch those middle school students watch the big kids playing the band. So that was fun. So moving on to upcoming events, we have the Policy Committee is meeting at 8 a.m. on March 12th here in the Annex. The Special Education Advisory Committee is also meeting on the 12th at 6:30 at the James City County Rec Center. The Student Advisory Committee is meeting on March 25th at 3 o'clock in the afternoon at Lafayette in the Media Center. And the 21st Century Career Ready Advisory Committee is also meeting on the 25th here in room 309. And then upcoming meetings, we have our joint session with our 2 funding partners, the city and the county, on the 13th at the Stryker Center at 9 a.m. We have a closed session on St. Patrick's Day on the 17th at 6 p.m. At the county complex, followed by a regular meeting at 6:30. And then on April 14th, we have a closed session here in the Annex in room 309, followed by work session and action items in room 300. So looking at the agenda for the next regular meeting, we'll have a calendar update and a presentation on equity, focusing on our English language learners. And unless there are additional comments, this meeting is adjourned.